Dadperfectrevenge. My daughter-in-law called me a blue-collar embarrassment until the IRS knocked on her door. My 8-year-old granddaughter Dorothy tugged on my sleeve last Tuesday and whispered something that changed everything. Grandpa, something's wrong with Mommy's money. I'm Harold Coleman, 59 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've watched my son's wife Jessica treat me like I'm some kind of embarrassment to their Silicon Valley lifestyle. What she doesn't know is that before I became a simple tax accountant, I spent 15 years as a CIA financial analyst, tracking international money laundering operations worth billions. That Tuesday afternoon at Dorothy's school pickup, I was wearing my usual khakis and polo shirt when Jessica showed up in her Tesla Model S, designer everything, talking loudly on her phone about some marketing campaign. She barely acknowledged me, just rolled her eyes when Dorothy ran to hug me first. "Dorothy, get in the car. We're late for your violin lesson," Jessica snapped, not even looking at me. "Harold, you really should coordinate with us before showing up." It's confusing for Dorothy. That's been her tone for 3 years now. Ever since she married my son, Carl, and decided that his family wasn't quite up to her standards. See, Jessica Martinez Coleman comes from tech money. Her father sold his startup for $200 million when she was in college. She graduated Stanford at 22, landed a marketing director job at some hot AI company, and apparently that makes me and my wife, Patricia, invisible. Jessica is 32 now, which should be old enough to show basic respect to family, but maturity doesn't always come with age. She's got this way of talking to me like I'm the hired help, not the man who raised the husband she claims to love. But Dorothy's whisper stuck with me all week. Something's wrong with Mommy's money. Kids notice things adults miss. They see patterns before we do. I started paying attention, real attention. Jessica drives a $120,000 Tesla, lives in a $2.8 million house in Palo Alto, wears watches that cost more than most people's cars. Her Instagram is full of charity galas and exclusive events. But here's the thing about working financial crimes for the CIA. You learn to spot the tells, the lifestyle that doesn't quite match the legitimate income. Her marketing director's salary, even at a hot tech company, maybe pulls $180,000 a year. Carl makes good money as a software engineer, probably $160,000. That's $340,000 combined, which sounds like a lot until you factor in Silicon Valley housing costs, taxes, and the lifestyle she's flaunting. The math doesn't work. 2 weeks after Dorothy's comment, I was at their house for Sunday dinner. Patricia and I try to see our granddaughter regularly, even though Jessica makes it clear we're tolerated, not welcomed. I was helping Carl fix a loose cabinet door when Jessica walked past with her laptop, talking to someone about transferring funds for the children's charity foundation. That caught my attention. I'd heard her mention this foundation before, always in passing, always with that self-important tone she uses when she wants people to know she's doing important things. After dinner, while the women were cleaning up and Carl was helping Dorothy with homework, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Their home office was right across the hall, door open, Jessica's laptop still running. Old habits from the agency die hard. I took a quick look. What I saw made my blood run cold. Jessica's laptop showed bank statements for something called the Bay Area Children's Education Foundation, deposits from various tech companies, individual donors, even some government grants. Total incoming funds over the past 18 months, $1.2 million. But the outgoing transfers caught my eye immediately. Large sums moving to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Personal credit card payments being made from foundation funds. Mortgage payments on their house coming directly from charity money. Even that Tesla was purchased with a foundation check, disguised as a transportation expense for educational outreach. She was stealing from a children's charity, and not just skimming a little off the top. She was treating it like her personal bank account. I memorized what I could and went back to dinner, acting normal, but inside I was furious. Not just because she was a thief, but because she'd been treating my family like garbage while funding her lifestyle with stolen charity money. Every condescending comment, every eye roll, every time she made me feel like I wasn't good enough, all of it paid for with money stolen from kids' education programs. That night, I called George Brennan. We'd worked together at the agency for 8 years before he moved to the FBI. Now he's retired, but he still has connections, and more importantly, he knows how to build a case that'll stick. Harry, George said when I explained the situation. You sure about this? Going. After family is messy business. She's not family, I said. Family doesn't steal from children and then look down on honest people. George was quiet for a moment. What do you need? Help me build a real case. Something the feds can't ignore. I know someone at IRS Criminal Investigation. Guy named Arthur Foster. Solid investigator, specializes in charity fraud. You want me to set up a meeting? Yeah. But George, this stays between us until we know what we're dealing with. Understood. Harry, if what you're telling me is true, this woman is looking at serious federal time. Wire fraud, money laundering, theft of federal funds. That's not white-collar slap-on-the-wrist stuff. Good, I said. Maybe it's time someone taught her that blue-collar people aren't as stupid as she thinks. We met at a diner in San Mateo the next morning. George brought his contact from IRS Criminal Investigation, Detective Arthur Foster. Foster was maybe 45. Sharp eyes, the kind of Fed who'd seen enough. Financial crime to spot patterns instantly. Mr. Coleman, Foster said, sliding into the booth across from me, George tells me you've got some concerns about a charity fraud case. I laid out what I'd seen, the foundation, the suspicious transfers, the lifestyle that didn't match legitimate income. Foster took notes, asked good questions about transaction amounts, timing, patterns of behavior. Here's the thing, Foster said finally, closing his notebook. What you saw could be enough for a search warrant, but we need more. We need her to make a mistake. Ideally, we need her to incriminate herself. How do we do that? George leaned forward. We make her feel safe, powerful. Get her talking about her success, her business acumen. People who steal money love to brag about how smart they are. Foster nodded. Is there an event coming up? Something public where she'd want to show off? I thought about it. Jessica had been talking nonstop about some big charity gala she was organizing, her company's annual fundraiser for the foundation. She'd been bragging about it for weeks, going on about how she was expecting 200 high-profile donors, how she'd lined up some tech billionaire's mansion as the venue. She's got this charity gala next month, I said. Big fundraiser for the foundation. She's been planning it for months, talking about how it's going to be the social event of the season. Perfect, Foster said. Here's what we're going to do. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Foster would arrange for several IRS and Treasury Department investigators to attend the gala as guests. Not obviously as feds. They'd come as potential donors, wealthy individuals interested in supporting children's education. Meanwhile, I'd engage Jessica in conversation about the foundation's success, get her talking about her financial management skills. The key, George explained, is to make her feel like the smartest person in the room. Get her explaining how she's built this foundation, how she's managed to make it so successful. Pride comes before the fall, and from what you've told us about this woman, she's got plenty of pride. What if she gets suspicious? I asked. Foster smiled. Trust me, Mr. Coleman, people like your daughter-in-law don't think regular folks are smart enough to catch them. She'll see an old guy asking questions about her success, and she'll assume you're finally recognizing how brilliant she is. For the next 3 weeks, I played the perfect supportive father-in-law. I asked Jessica about her work, complimented her business sense, even suggested that maybe I could learn some modern financial techniques from someone as successful as her. She ate it up like candy. Harold, she said one evening when Patricia and I were visiting for dinner, I'm glad you're finally starting to understand what real financial management looks like. It's not about just keeping books for small businesses. It's about vision, strategy, moving money where it can do the most good. The condescension in her voice was thick as honey, but I swallowed my pride and kept playing the role. You've really built something impressive with this foundation, I said. How do you manage to be so efficient with the funds? Jessica's eyes lit up. She loved talking about her success, especially to someone she considered beneath her intellectually. It's all about optimization, Harold. Traditional charities waste so much money on overhead, administrative costs, redundant staff, inefficient processes. I've streamlined everything, found ways to maximize impact while minimizing waste. What she meant, of course, was that she'd found ways to steal without getting caught. Or so she thought. That sounds incredibly complex, Patricia said, playing her part perfectly. My wife had worked as a nurse for 30 years before retiring, and she understood people better than most. How do you keep track of everything? Well, Jessica said, leaning back in her chair with that self-satisfied smile, it's really about understanding cash flow management and international fund optimization. Most people don't realize that you can achieve much better returns by moving money through different jurisdictions, taking advantage of various tax incentives and regulatory frameworks. I caught Patricia's eye across the table. Jessica was essentially describing money laundering techniques, but packaging it in business school jargon. Carl, bless him, was completely oblivious to what his wife was actually saying. He was proud of her success, had no idea that her business acumen was really just sophisticated theft. The foundation has grown so much since you started it, I said. What was your initial investment? Oh, we started small, Jessica said airily. Just $50,000 in seed funding from some angel investors who believed in the mission. But through careful management and strategic partnerships, we've scaled that into a $1.2 million operation in just 18 months. She said it like she was Steve Jobs unveiling the iPhone. No mention of the fact that most of that $1.2 million came from legitimate donors who thought they were helping kids' education programs. That's incredible growth, I said. You must have some very sophisticated financial systems in place. Absolutely, I've developed proprietary methods for fund allocation and distribution that maximize efficiency. For instance, we use offshore optimization accounts to reduce administrative overhead and ensure more money reaches the actual programs. Offshore optimization accounts. That was a new euphemism for Cayman Islands money laundering. The more she talked, the deeper she dug her own grave. And the beautiful thing was, she thought she was impressing me. She thought she was finally making the simple-minded father-in-law understand how brilliant and sophisticated she was. What she didn't realize was that every word out of her mouth was building the case against her. 2 days before the gala, Foster called me with the final details. We've got 6 agents confirmed as attendees, he said. All of them experienced in financial crimes. All of them will be wearing recording devices. Your job is to get her talking, and our job is to document everything she says. What happens after? If she gives us what we think she's going to give us, detailed admissions of financial fraud, we'll have enough to move forward immediately. Search warrants, asset seizure, the whole package. That night, lying in bed next to Patricia, I thought about what I was about to do. I was going to destroy my son's marriage. There was no way around that. When the feds arrested Jessica, Carl would have to choose between defending a criminal and accepting the truth about the woman he'd married. You having second thoughts? Patricia asked quietly. About stopping a criminal who's stealing from children? No. About what this is going to do to Carl and Dorothy? Yeah, I am. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Harold, that woman has been treating you like garbage for 3 years. She's stolen over $1 million from children's charities. And she's done it all while making you feel like you're not good enough to breathe the same air as her. She was right, of course. But that didn't make it easier. Tomorrow night, I said, everything changes. The night of the gala, Patricia and I dressed up nice. I wore my best suit, the one I'd bought for Carl's wedding 3 years ago. Patricia looked beautiful in her navy blue dress, the one she saves for special occasions. Jessica had reluctantly invited us, probably because it would look weird not to include family at a charity event, especially one supposedly benefiting children. The venue was stunning, some tech billionaire's mansion in Los Altos Hills, overlooking the entire Silicon Valley. Maybe 200 people, all dressed to impress, champagne flowing like water, silent auction tables loaded with expensive prizes, Tesla cars, wine country getaways, private jet trips to Napa, the kind of stuff that costs more than most people make in a year. Foster and his team were already there when we arrived. I spotted them immediately. They had that federal agent look even in expensive suits. Clean-cut, alert eyes, the way they positioned themselves to observe the room. One was chatting with Jessica near the bar, asking intelligent questions about the Foundation's mission. I worked my way over, playing the proud father-in-law. Jessica's done such incredible work with this foundation, I told the man, who I knew was actually a Treasury Department investigator named Williams. The growth she's managed in just 18 months is remarkable. Jessica glowed like a 100-watt bulb. Harold, you're too kind. Though I have to say, it's really about understanding how money flows, how to leverage relationships and optimize fund allocation for maximum social impact. That sounds incredibly complex, Williams said, pulling out a small notebook. I'm always interested in innovative approaches to philanthropy. How do you maintain oversight with so many different funding sources? And just like that, Jessica launched into what amounted to a detailed confession. She explained her revolutionary approach to fund management, how she'd identified systematic inefficiencies in traditional charity models, how she'd developed cutting-edge processes for moving money where it was needed most. What she was actually describing was textbook embezzlement and money laundering, but she packaged it in MBA buzzwords that made it sound like breakthrough business innovation. Traditional foundations lose 30 to 40% of their funding to administrative overhead, Jessica said, gesturing with her champagne glass. I've reduced that to less than 5% through strategic offshore partnerships and dynamic cash flow optimization. Williams nodded, scribbling notes. How exactly does the offshore component work? Well, Jessica said, lowering her voice conspiratorially, most people don't understand. International financial instruments. By routing funds through carefully selected Caribbean jurisdictions, we can take advantage of preferential tax treatments and regulatory frameworks that maximize fund preservation. I watched Williams's face. He kept nodding sympathetically, asking follow-up questions, getting Jessica to elaborate on her methods. She was so proud of her financial cleverness that she didn't realize she was confessing to federal crimes in front of a room full of potential witnesses. For instance, Jessica continued, warming to her favorite subject. If we receive a $100,000 donation, traditional charities might see $60,000 actually reach programs after administrative costs. Through my optimization system, we can preserve $95,000 for program delivery. How do you track program delivery? Williams asked innocently. Jessica paused for just a second, but then smiled that confident smile I'd seen 100 times. We use a distributed impact model, she said smoothly. Rather than funding traditional brick-and-mortar programs with high overhead costs, we support individual educational initiatives directly. It's much more efficient. What she meant was that the money disappeared into offshore accounts and personal expenses, but there was no actual program delivery to track. The conversation continued for 25 minutes. Jessica described transferring funds to international educational partnerships, the Cayman accounts. She explained how she minimized duplicative administrative functions by paying personal expenses from charity funds. She detailed her flexible approach to resource utilization, stealing. By the time Williams excused himself to think about potential partnership opportunities, Jessica had essentially provided a complete roadmap of her criminal operation. But she wasn't done. Throughout the evening, she worked the room like a politician, explaining her innovative methods to anyone who would listen. Foster had positioned his other agents strategically, and Jessica obligingly repeated her confessions to multiple federal investigators, each time adding more details about her proprietary financial optimization techniques. Around 10 p.m., she found me by the silent auction tables, slightly drunk on champagne and success. "Harold," she said, putting her hand on my arm. "I have to say, I'm really glad you're finally starting to understand what I do. For so long, I wasn't sure you appreciated the complexity of modern financial management." "I'm learning," I said carefully. "It's not your fault," she continued, her voice taking on that familiar condescending tone. "Your generation was taught to think about money in very simple terms. Save, spend, invest in basic instruments. But today's financial landscape requires much more sophisticated thinking." She gestured around the room. "All of this, the foundation's success, the social impact we're creating, the recognition from the tech community. It's because I understood that traditional approaches weren't going to work. I had to innovate, had to find new ways to move money efficiently." "It's impressive," I said, meaning something entirely different than what she thought. "The beautiful thing is that everyone benefits," Jessica said. "Donors get to support education initiatives, children get better programs, and I get to build something meaningful while frankly living the lifestyle that success should provide." There it was. Direct admission that she was using charity funds for personal lifestyle expenses. "How do you mean?" I asked. Jessica looked around to make sure no one else was listening, then leaned closer. "Harold, between you and me, one of the advantages of innovative fund management is that you can structure compensation and benefits in ways that traditional organizations can't. When you're moving money efficiently through international channels, you can optimize not just program delivery, but also operational sustainability. She was telling me that she paid herself through offshore money laundering, but doing it in language that sounded like business school theory. The foundation covers my consulting fees, operational expenses, even things like transportation and housing allowances. It's all completely legitimate. I'm providing valuable services that require appropriate compensation. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. She'd just admitted to wire fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement while thinking she was explaining sophisticated business practices to her simple-minded father-in-law. Around midnight, as the gala was winding down, I saw Williams approach Foster near the exit. They exchanged brief nods, and Foster pulled out his phone. 2 weeks later, they came for her. I was at their house having coffee with Carl when the doorbell rang at 7 a.m. 6 federal agents, search warrant in hand, badges out, serious faces. Jessica answered the door in her silk robe, probably expecting a delivery or maybe a neighbor with some minor complaint. Jessica Martinez Coleman, you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, theft of federal funds, and conspiracy to commit tax evasion. The next 3 hours were chaos. Agents searching through files, seizing computers and phones, boxing up financial records. Carl kept asking what was happening, his voice getting higher and more panicked with each question. Dorothy cried from upstairs, scared by all the strange voices and commotion. Jessica just stood there in handcuffs, still in her robe, staring at me like she was trying to solve a complex puzzle. It wasn't until later, when Carl and I were finally alone, that he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Dad, how did you know? How did any of this happen?" "Your daughter told me something was wrong with Mommy's money," I said quietly. "Kids see things we miss. And once you know what to look for, the patterns are obvious." Carl stared at me for a long moment. "But Dad, how did you know how to investigate all this? How did you know what questions to ask, what evidence to look for?" That's when I told him about my real background, about the 15 years with the CIA, tracking financial crimes for the government, about the international money laundering cases I'd worked, the terrorist funding networks I'd helped shut down, the skills I'd developed over a decade and a half of following money trails across borders and through shell companies. Carl's face went through about 6 different expressions: shock, confusion, disbelief, then a slow understanding. "She always said you were just a simple accountant," he said finally. "I am just a simple accountant," I replied. "But sometimes simple accountants have more interesting backgrounds than people assume. And sometimes when someone treats you like you're too stupid to understand complex financial arrangements, they make the mistake of explaining exactly how they're breaking the law." Carl was quiet for a long time, processing everything. His wife was a criminal. His father was a former CIA operative. His daughter had been the one to blow the whistle. It was a lot for anyone to handle. "Dad," he said eventually, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay. Did you set her up? The gala, getting her to talk to those agents. Was that all planned?" I looked at my son, this good man who'd been caught in the middle of something he never saw coming. "Yes," I said. "Once I confirmed what she was doing, I worked with federal investigators to build a case. She confessed to multiple felonies while thinking she was impressing people with her business acumen." Carl put his head in his hands. "Jesus, Dad, my wife is going to prison. Your wife was stealing money meant for children's education programs," I said gently. "She was living a lifestyle funded by charity fraud. And she was doing all of it while treating your family like we were beneath her." "I know," Carl said. "I know you're right. Just Dorothy's going to grow up with her mother in prison. And part of me wonders if there was another way." That was the question I'd been asking myself for weeks. Could I have handled this differently? Could I have confronted Jessica privately, given her a chance to stop, found some way to resolve this without destroying Carl's marriage? "Son," I said, "your wife stole over $1 million from multiple charities. She laundered money through offshore accounts. She committed federal crimes for 18 months while bragging about her financial genius." There was no version of this that ended with a quiet conversation and everyone moving on. Carl nodded slowly. "What happens now?" "Now there's a trial. And based on what I saw and what she admitted to those agents, she's going to be convicted. Federal judges don't go easy on charity fraud. The trial was indeed straightforward. Jessica's lawyers tried to argue that she was just poorly advised about international financial regulations, but when the government played recordings of her explaining her proprietary optimization techniques to multiple federal agents, that defense collapsed pretty quickly. She got 8 years federal prison, full restitution to the charities she'd defrauded, about $1.1 million total. Her house, cars, jewelry, everything of value was seized to pay back what she'd stolen. Carl filed for divorce while she was awaiting sentencing. He got custody of Dorothy, obviously, and moved into a smaller place in Mountain View. The $2.8 million house had to be sold anyway to pay restitution. 6 months after the sentencing, I got an unexpected phone call from the Treasury Department. "Mr. Coleman," the voice said, "this is Director Sarah Martinez from the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. I'd like to discuss a consulting opportunity with you. Apparently, experienced financial investigators are hard to find, especially ones who understand both the technical aspects of money laundering and the psychology of financial criminals. We've been following your work on the Chen Coleman case," Director Martinez explained when we met the following week. "The way you identified the fraud patterns, built the investigation, and facilitated the confession. That's exactly the kind of expertise we need for our white-collar crime unit." The job offer was substantial, more money than I'd ever made as a tax accountant, interesting work, the chance to use skills I'd developed over 15 years with the CIA. I took it. Patricia was proud. Carl was amazed. Dorothy was just happy that Grandpa was important enough that people in Washington wanted his help with important things. The best part happened at Dorothy's 9th birthday party last month. She introduced me to her friends as my grandpa, who catches bad guys who steal money from kids. Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and we were cleaning up, Dorothy came over and hugged me tight. "Grandpa," she said, "I'm glad you listened when I told you about Mommy's money. I'm glad you trusted me enough to tell me," I said. "Are you sad that Mommy had to go away?" That was a hard question. Was I sad that my son's marriage had ended? Yes. Was I sad that Dorothy would grow up visiting her mother in federal prison? Absolutely. Was I sad that Jessica Martinez Coleman was behind bars for stealing from children's charities? Not even a little bit. "I'm sad that your mom made bad choices," I told Dorothy. "But I'm not sad that she got caught. And I'm proud of you for being brave enough to tell me when you noticed something was wrong." Dorothy smiled. "Dad says you used to catch bad guys for the government before you were an accountant." "That's right. Will you teach me how to catch bad guys when I'm older?" I looked at this smart, brave little girl who'd blown the whistle on financial fraud when she was 8 years old. "If that's what you want to do," I said, "I'll teach you everything I know." These days, Carl and Dorothy come over every Sunday for dinner. Carl's doing well. The divorce was hard, but he's better off without a criminal for a wife. He's dating someone new, a teacher from Dorothy's school who treats everyone with basic human decency. Dorothy's thriving in school, especially in math. Last week she asked me to explain how money moves between countries, and I realized she's got the kind of analytical mind that would make a great financial investigator someday. Patricia and I are happier than we've been in years. I'm doing work that matters, using skills I'd thought were retired forever. The Treasury job has led to consulting opportunities with other federal agencies, and I've helped build cases against financial criminals from Silicon Valley to Wall Street. But the most satisfying part isn't the professional recognition, or the interesting work, or even the substantial pay increase. The most satisfying part is knowing that when it mattered, when my family was being disrespected and children were being robbed, I didn't just sit there and take it. Jessica Martinez Coleman spent 3 years treating me like a blue-collar embarrassment who wasn't sophisticated enough to understand her world. She thought I was too simple, too old-fashioned, too intellectually limited to see through her financial genius. What she didn't understand is that sometimes the simple accountant in khakis and a polo shirt is exactly the person you should worry about most. Because sometimes that simple accountant spent 15 years tracking financial criminals for the CIA. Sometimes he knows exactly what international money laundering looks like when it's dressed up in MBA buzzwords. And sometimes when you treat people with contempt while committing federal crimes right in front of them, those people take it personally. Respect isn't about what car you drive, or where you went to college, or how much money you make. Respect is about character, integrity, and how you treat the people around you. Jessica. Learned that lesson the hard way. And now she's got 8 years in federal prison to think about it. Never underestimate the quiet person in the room. They might be watching, listening, and understanding far more than you realize. True power isn't about flaunting wealth or status. It's about having the skills and character to act decisively when justice is needed.